My name is Jacob Navok. I'm CEO at Genvid Technologies, and we're going to have a fun talk today. We're going to go a little bit into a history of the industry and the changes that are leading toward esports. We're going to talk about thoughts about why esports broadcasts are of significant importance to the future of the game industry, and then think about what it is that can actually level up esports broadcasts into something fairly unique and different. I'm going to start by talking about myself and my background, and specifically my bias. I spent about 10 years in Japan. It's a long time. This is Shinjuku. I used to live here. Wonderful part of Tokyo. Very busy, very noisy. I spent a long time at Square Enix Holdings. I worked directly for Yoichi Wada. He was the CEO of Square Enix for many years. I also worked for Matsuda-san, who's the current CEO of Square Enix. When I was hired by Square, actually, they didn't have an American in the holdings company. It's the parent company that oversees the group. But they were looking at kind of where the future was going. This was 2009 or so, and Apple and Google and phones and everything else were coming out, and they wanted somebody to do new technology and business development. So I oversaw group business development for them at the holdings level. We also did a lot of work on cloud gaming, which I'll get into in a moment. But these are some of my favorite photos from my time at Square Enix and at Genvid in the last few years. So with Wada-san and Iwasaki-san, with Kojima-san, with Tim Sweeney from Epic. And, I consider myself very fortunate to have worked with these guys for so many years. We together started a company called Shinra Technologies, which was named after the evil corporation from Final Fantasy VII, which people always find amusing. I told Wada-san not to name it Shinra. I said people are going to tell us that, we're evil and it's going to become a backlash from fans. And he said, no, people will love that name. And I said, well, you're Wada-san, you know better than me. And that's what we ended up calling it. And my new company, Genvid, we started up with a number of my former colleagues from Square Enix, some of whom are here in the room. And I want to start by talking about kind of our general thesis and theory about the way the game industry is going, and then see how that connects to esports itself. The fundamental thinking idea is that cloud can power new experiences. The idea that the power of servers and the power of broadcast and streaming enables new experiences for the game industry that haven't been possible up until now. And that theory led to some of the work that we had done at Shinra with very vast server-side worlds, and also leads to the work that we're doing today at Genvid about how you can improve esports broadcast. It all comes back down to an ability to stream something interesting. And if you look at the way that esports has grown, most of it has become popular and powerful because of streaming, because of Twitch, because of YouTube. And if you take a game and you stream it as is, you've got one form of entertainment. But if you actually build a broadcast understanding what's possible in games and how the game industry works, I think you can do a radically different form of broadcast. And so the theory that we have in terms of leveling up esports broadcast really comes back to reconsidering how people interact with games. If we look at the industry today, interactions are primarily between a player and a viewer. And there's a strong bifurcation between them. There is a split between them. But around them are different kinds of fans. Who are the people that are watching? Are they fans of your game? Are they fans of the personality that's streaming your game? This difference forms the foundation of the changes that we'll speak about today and where we think things are going in the future. I want to talk about why now? Why is esports growing? Why is game viewership growing? What's changing in the industry and economies today that's fueled the growth of Twitch, that's fueled the growth of YouTube? And I want to start by speaking about the experience economy, because if we understand these fundamentals, we can see where things are going and what kind of changes we need to make to our broadcasts in the future. The fact is, we're about to have a lot more time on our hands. If you look at automated driving, if you look at robots, which the Japanese are very into, what it means is that you're going to be sitting around with a lot more time. If you're not driving your car, what are you doing? If you look at the transformations that the auto industry are trying to do in the next 10 years, you're basically going to be watching a screen while your car does the driving for you. What are you going to be doing while you're sitting around? Well, if recent years and trends are any indication, you're going to be playing games. If we look at music and we look at movies, those industries have fairly stagnated. They haven't grown, but there has been tremendous growth in game industry content, in the playing of games and in the viewing of games, in the idea that interactive media as a whole is growing. And so when people have all this time on their hands, they're probably going to be spending it on the stuff that we're building. There's a general trend that we're seeing among different industries that are leading to a very interesting convergence. Technology, games, fundamentally interactive pieces of software are converging with the web and converging with spectating in ways that up until now hadn't been happening. My former boss, Wada-san, used to say that games are the most complex form of software out there. They're the only form of software that required special hardware to run, GPUs. Without those, you couldn't get the games to run on it. You had software like Mathematica and others, but even those didn't tend to require GPUs. So if you've got incredibly complex forms of software like games, where do they start and where do they go from here? Now, he had another interesting thesis on the industry, which was that the game industry is not a series of shifts, but similar to geological strata, are a series of markets that built on top of each other. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a moment. But if we go back to the history of the industry and we look at arcades and coin ops, people began by gathering. There were very complex pieces of hardware that could only run one game at a time on them. And that market grew, but for the most part, plateaued. And in Japan, it's still fairly significant, but in the rest of the world, it shrank. Then games went home. We had home consoles. We had an expansion of the ecosystem, because for very cheap pieces of hardware, we could have, with a razor and blades model, many different pieces of software. And that expanded the industry even greater. So we can see new growth in the industry as a result of the release of the home consoles. Now we go online. We enter the era of network multiplayer. Further growth, PC, console. This is everything from MMOs to stuff like League of Legends these days. And if you add mobile and tablet, which further expands the ecosystem, you can see the geological strata that we were talking about. The industry doesn't shift, it expands as new forms of technology, as new forms of engagement, as new forms of revenue model grow. As the hardware becomes cheaper, as we go from really expensive arcade cabinets that only owners of these arcades could afford and that you bought via quarters, to cheaper home consoles, to the fact that everybody already owns a phone and therefore you don't need an additional investment in games, you can see the industry expand. And so games go online for everyone. The biggest transformation that we're going to see going forward is live streams, because you don't need any form of hardware to get a live stream going. You don't need to download anything. It just works. These days, microwaves have enough power to decode certain forms of live streams. So, as we look at the expansion of the ecosystem going forward, the ability to entertain people through interactive media has been the driving force of this growth in the game industry, and only will be further through live streams. Now, we've been treating it as a form of passive media, and where that changes and what that means for the industry we'll get into for a moment. But I spoke about convergence, so I'll talk a little bit about this too. If we look at where the web has gone over the course of the last 30 years, you start with basic communication. You're replacing the mail and phones with email and BBS. You move on to the 1990s web, GeoCities and old school Amazon and Yahoo. To about 10 years ago, social 2.0. I mean, I hated that phrase, but put that aside. And where are we now? What is every major tech company focused on? It is also live streams. What is Facebook's biggest emphasis these days? Getting you to live stream your life. YouTube. Microsoft with Mixer. Every single company, even Amazon's acquisition of Twitch, is with an understanding that the web is transitioning to live stream as one of the most biggest uses of its technology. And of course, the media companies know this. What's one of the biggest uses of web video these days? It's Netflix. And the future of the web is going to be defined by three key trends. Low latency streaming. We already see this with Mixer. 250 millisecond streaming presented to you by Microsoft, who's spending a lot of money to subsidize you based on what the cost of those streams must be. YouTube announced 1 to 2 second ultra low latency. We'll see where the others go from here, but this is the trend. Cheap server-side rendering. Now this is very interesting. When we started Shinra back at Square Enix, we were assuming that it would be very cheap to just put GeForce cards in the data center and stream off of that, but NVIDIA wouldn't let you do that. They released a series of technologies for the server that were pretty expensive, that are still expensive today on AWS, but based on investments that we're seeing from Amazon, based on investments that we're seeing from Google, Oracle, and other places, we're going to see the cost of GPU compute go down in the data center in the next few years. And finally, the most important revolution of all, 5G. This is going to fundamentally change the way in which people access and interact with the internet. And so if you look at where the future of the web is going, it's very interesting because download speed, of course, is increasing from 3G to 4G to 5G. And there are talks from the wireless companies about just selling you a 5G router at home that will become your primary internet source. If you think about why they're doing that, I mean, we were working with Verizon 5 years ago, and I asked them, why did you stop investing in fiber in the United States? They said, because 5G is coming. 5G is as good as fiber. It's got the same throughput, and it's got incredible latency because it's a flat stack. And so when you've got theoretical latency on 5G of 1 millisecond and fiber levels of throughput, imagine the kind of things you can do. So the web is transitioning into something bigger, greater, and faster. And if we look at that final piece of convergence, spectating, well, I'll start 2,000 years ago. People used to spectate and interact with spectating by going like this, right? It was the idea that back at the Colosseum, as you're watching, you could actually kill somebody just by putting your thumb down. Now, it's interesting where spectating has gone because modern sports, of course, don't have thumbs down, thumbs up, kill, death options, thankfully. But people do come and get incredibly excited for live events. The idea of spectating is that it's live and therefore exciting. People come together to urge on their team, their gladiator, what have you. Now, I mentioned at the beginning I spent 10 years in Japan. I went to a lot of Japanese sports games. And there's very interesting sections in the Japanese sports stadium of people cheering and supporting and going crazy. I just want to show you some videos if you've never seen this before. This is Japanese soccer. And they've got an entire section where people are bringing trumpets and flags and other things, and they're singing theme songs that they make up for the teams and for the players. For some reason, this one is based on Green Day's Minority. I don't know. They're saying ole ole to Minority. It's fascinating. But they get really excited for this. And here's another quick clip of what it's like. This is what the modern day Coliseum has become. It's live, it's fun, it's exciting. It forms a communication bond between you and other people who are fans of that tribe, of that sports team that you're part of. And so if we return back to where it is that we see things going, the next step after sports was, interestingly enough, reality television. The idea that you could actually potentially vote for what's going to happen. And so what you're seeing is a theme of interactivity into spectating and watching, from the thumbs up, thumbs down, to the cheering, to the ability to decide what happens. And interestingly enough, that also connects to streaming. If you look at why Twitch is exciting and YouTube is exciting, it's that ability to chat and talk with other people and interact with the caster and the personality who's doing stuff. And so we come back again to streaming. And of course, the be on and end all of this was the product that got Twitch bought by Amazon for $1 billion, which was Twitch Plays Pokemon, the kind of ultimate interactive form of spectating, where the spectators themselves made the viewing into a game. So if we take as an assumption that the web and spectating and games are all converging into live streams, where does the industry go from here? What does it mean? And why does it connect to esports? I want to talk about something that we call Experience 3.0. And this will all start to make sense once we get into it. If you think about arcades, which we spoke about, they were local. They were about the people around you. They were about that experience that you had between yourself and the game. We're now in the online era, the multiplayer era, where games are still run locally on your device, but can be networked into something greater. But if you recall that trend about cheap server-side rendering and incredible internet connections with 5G and ultra-low latency streaming, what do you need a game running on your device for anymore? I mean, in effect, Twitch Plays Pokemon was a game, but it was a game played by tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people simultaneously. Where we think this is all going is what we call Experience 3.0. It's ubiquitous gaming. It's the idea that the game product itself is an experience and that there is no bifurcation, there is no split between who's watching and who's playing. It becomes a kind of spectrum. And I'll get into this more in a moment. But if we look at the stages, we're already at perpetual development. Look at what EA has been saying about their recent shifts in the way that they develop. It's all about games as a service. That is what perpetual development is. There will not be a League of Legends 2. They're going to keep on adding and amending the original. And so the game industry, which started as a fixed product, now has moved into perpetual development. We're next moving into play now and play everywhere. If you look at mobile devices and mobile products, they're already halfway of the step there. With the stuff that you can do with Steam and cloud saves these days, the only thing that stops you from being able to play your favorite Steam games everywhere is whether you've got a GPU in your friend's computer or not. But that's going to change as well. And so the next few steps, massive participation, which we hit with Twitch Plays Pokemon, the ability to do multiple levels of meaningful engagement, that's the kind of stuff that you're doing on Mixer, where you've got the ability to interact directly with the streamer. We're getting there. And so that idea of these very big interactive events that we are forecasting are going to happen is probably going to be here in the next few years, faster than we think. And so that ties into esports. What is an esport? It is a community-driven stream that you watch alongside many others of interactive media. It is something that you are watching because it's exciting. Even though it was an originally game, you're not playing it yourself right now. You are getting enthused by a broadcast of a product that other people are also enthused by. That there are professional players who are excited by what they're seeing, and that's turning into a new form of media. Now, the ironic part of esports is that games are originally interactive, The moment that we encode that and turn that into a stream, we lose all of that interactivity. Which seems bizarre, and we'll get into how we fix that in a moment. But suffice to say, the growth of esports is defined by all of those trends that we saw before. It's defined by the trend of live streaming. It's defined by the trend of interactivity. It's defined by the fact that people throughout the history of spectating loved to cheer and loved to feel an effect on what they were watching. Now we're seeing very significant growth in the esports industry. For us, it's a first step to the kind of transformations that we're going to see in the industry in a moment. And so I'll connect esports very shortly to that entire idea of Experience 3.0. But first, we want to understand why a broadcast. Esports starts with the idea of a broadcast. If you just have a bunch of people in a room playing games against each other, that's a LAN party. That's not an esport. The moment that you broadcast it, that you turn it into something that people are watching anywhere, that's the moment that it changes and becomes something greater than people playing games together, because it becomes something that is visually exciting and potentially monetizable. Now, the interesting part of this is that we've seen tremendous growth in viewership. Twitch gets hundreds of millions of viewers every month. And yet, the viewer is still underserved. They are limited by what they are watching because games were designed for players. A form of interactive broadcast that treats the viewer not just as somebody watching somebody else play a game, but enables them to interact with it, connects exactly back to what we were speaking about when it came to breaking that bifurcation between the player and the viewer. And I'll get into what that means in a moment. When you have the ability to touch and feel and connect with a stream, you're no longer somebody watching something. You're no longer a simple viewer. You're actually a participant in something greater. You can engage how you want. And I'm going to jump into something that will showcase this in a moment. So we are looking at a live stream. This is on YouTube, and it's live. This is something that we built to showcase all of this experience and, build upon the logic that I just explained, alongside with Epic and the Unreal Tournament team. So it's YouTube and it's live. Now, there's no player that's streaming this. This is actually running off of an Amazon server being rendered there, and so there's nothing on the client. Now, for the purposes of a demo, we've got bots running a match because it's just easier. But I want to show you a couple of things that you normally could not do on YouTube. So I'm about to click on this player. As a result of clicking on this player, all of his information, what gun he's using, his kill-death ratio, his points, etc., it's all appearing. You have no normal ability to do that on YouTube. What we've done is we've extracted the data from the engine and synchronized it to every individual viewer who's watching the stream in real time on this embedded website. Now, this can work on YouTube. It can work on Twitch through one of the extensions. It doesn't matter. But we start to have the ability to interact with the video that we're watching as though we're actually in the game itself. And every individual viewer can customize the UI, the elements they want to see, the data they want to see. I'm no longer just a viewer. I'm actually participating in this broadcast. Now, as this player is running around, you may notice a Pepsi logo or a Mountain Dew logo. That looks like it's part of the broadcast. It's not. Once again, we're taking data from the game engine, we're synchronizing it, and we're analyzing what the camera is positioned on at the exact frame of the YouTube stream. And as a result, inside of the browser itself, we can put locally native ads. The player never sees it. It's targeted to the browser, which means it's clickable, it's interactive. I can send Pepsi to a kid, Budweiser to an adult, Sapporo to somebody in Japan. It doesn't matter. We can put traps on the walls. We can make adjustments to it in real time. All of the data that was there inside of your game is now synchronized through a very lightweight HTML and JavaScript overlay that works on mobile devices, works on whatever you want. And so you can start to see, I'm not just a viewer anymore. I'm actually participating in this. If I want to cheer for somebody, I've taken chat away because chat's kind of boring. And I'm going to cheer for this person by clicking the like button. And as a result of clicking the like button, he's got a flame above his head. That flame, again, is using the player data. It's completely local to what we're watching. So I can be a fan of the red team and get a flame. I can be a fan of the blue team and I can get blue fireworks. I can do something completely different and send different sounds to every viewer who's watching it. So if you return back to that idea of the Japanese cheering that we saw, the ability to create cheering effects for people who are fans of Team Red or fans of Team Blue, who have their own customized options to it, becomes incredibly powerful. Now, as a result of cheering for Malice here, the camera has changed. We had actually been randomly rotating between different people. It had been completely random who the camera was focused on. But because we cheered for Malice and we detected that interest in him, we told the camera, stay on him. Focus on him. Viewers are interested in him. So again, now I have the ability to decide what it is that I want to watch alongside the others. And if I don't like Malice, returning to the idea of the Colosseum, we built this alongside Epic, well, I can thumbs down him. And what's going to happen is he's going to be killed. So he's got a skull with a countdown timer on his head because I just pressed the skull button. He's going to die like that. Bye-bye. I'm sorry, Malice. That's proof that this is live. And we can go ahead and we can kill everybody in here if we want to. I'm not recommending that game developers put kill buttons into their streams, but if you wanted to do other things, for example, click on the advertisements, generate points as a viewer, and then set traps, support the team that you're interested in, self-help, send health potions, we don't care. Whatever you want to do, you can do. And the moment that you've got that level of interactivity, again, you're not a viewer, but you're not a player either. You're a participant in something that's live and being streamed. I don't have this game installed on this computer. I'm just running it in a browser. There's no installation or anything else, but I'm able to participate how I want. In fact, the only difference between this and having the game installed is camera control, is whether I have a controller in my hand and I'm actually adjusting the camera in real time or not. And once we get down to 30 milliseconds of latency, well, you can have that too, because that's cloud gaming. But we're starting to transition away from this idea that a game is something that's installed here and runs on my device into something where the game is just a window into another level of participation. How do I want to participate? Do I want to take the controller and play? Do I simply want to watch and lean back and do nothing? Do I want to click and get information? Do I want to cheer for somebody? Do I want to kill them or set a trap or do something else? The spectrum allows for different levels of engagement, which allows for very wide events. You can imagine experiences in the game industry where hundreds of thousands of people are collectively making decisions on what's going to happen in a live world. When we think about esports and we think about what broadcasts need and where they are going to start with the idea of information. They are going to move into the idea of cheering and support, and then they're going to move into full interactivity. And at that point, what is the difference between an esport and a game? In fact, in some ways, esports simply is another meta on top of the interactive media that we're already creating. By the way, if we don't want to watch this from the player perspective, we don't have to. We can switch it to whatever camera angle we want. We can flip around. This is called the flak camera. There's a super weapon in the corner called the flak gun. And so when players come and pick it up, we can go and see that in real time. Again, making decisions as a viewer. I mentioned that that logo was completely local. I can just press a button and turn it on and off. It's not part of the broadcast. So we can do any kind of targeting we want. If we want to see it from a God's eye perspective, we can see it from a God's eye perspective as well. Wherever you want to position cameras, you can do so. And so when as a viewer, you have the ability to see into different angles, you have the ability to select the information that you want. You're not just a viewer anymore. And so I return to the idea that viewers will become participants. How far you want to take that level of participation, what kind of elements you want to give to your viewers, it's up to you as the developer. You can choose. You don't have to give them everything that you see there, or you can give them more. What kind of experience you want to generate is the same as saying, do I want to make a mobile game or a console game, an FPS or something else? It's a new form of interactivity. And where we think this is going to go is a new form of revenue stream as well. Today, the customers of game developers are players. They're people who own and have something installed. You sell items to them. You sell content to them. That red ring that you saw around that player, that information box can be a viewer skinned hat, can be a viewer skinned weapon. In other words, you can allow viewers to purchase and acquire elements of UI and items as though they were in the game and sell it to them as microtransactions. You can imagine in the future the ability to sell that kill button for $1 and allow people to just screw around with it. Where this is really going to go, I don't know. But remember 10 years ago, we were all laughing at microtransactions, saying that gamers would never want to do that. And the entire mobile industry and the entire League of Legends, Dota, and everything else industry got built upon that. So the idea that you're going to be able to monetize your viewers directly and not treat them as simply another form of, player that you will eventually sell your product to is where we think this is going to go. You can monetize your spectators through ads. You can monetize these interactive viewers through the ability to sell them new engagements. Now, how do we do this? Where do we make improvements? We have to start with camera. One of the biggest problems with esports today and broadcast today are the fact that games were built for players, which means that cameras were built for players. We don't watch baseball from the perspective of a GoPro camera strapped to the player's back. It doesn't make sense. We position lots of cameras around a stadium, and we create a much more compelling viewing experience. The result of the limitation on camera is the majority of people who watch esports today are people who understand the game. Because how else are you going to understand what's happening in Overwatch? I mean, if you watch anything from those Overwatch streams, it's so chaotic in the first-person perspective. We need to be able to adjust camera and make it compelling for people who are not fans of the game if we want to take it the next step and level up that broadcast into something that people can understand on a much wider basis. Now, when it comes to the esports market, well, it's growing. There's a lot of talk about the growth of esports, and certainly even these estimates are likely to be low. It's going to go probably beyond 2 billion in a couple of years. But when we look at it compared to real sports, it's still pretty small. And moreover, and for me this is key, it's still about 1% or less of the actual entirety of the game industry. I think that there is a mistaken assumption that esports are separate from the game industry. No, they are a part of the game industry, and developers like yourselves are going to begin to monetize and take that spectatorship back. When I was at Square Enix, we sold Final Fantasy to Joe, and Joe streamed Final Fantasy. We didn't participate in that value chain. We didn't participate in that ecosystem. But the moment that we begin to do broadcasts ourselves and sell advertising to that, and sponsorships to that, and jerseys to that, and eventually items and engagements to that, we begin to participate in that value chain. That's going to grow this ecosystem and grow this industry tremendously. There are 3 tiers of interactions. You saw them in what I just showed you. But this is what's going to enable you to take the existing form of esports broadcast that you're doing and improve them greatly to attract that larger viewership base, to attract that new form of engagement that you can monetize. The first tier is about information. Remember when I clicked on that player, I got his gun, I got his data, I got things that I otherwise would not have been able to know had I just been watching a stream. Now, if I'm new to the game, you can imagine tooltips, information, pop-ups, things that are telling me, this is what's happening, this is what's going on, this is why this information in the UI is important. There are a lot of games, especially MOBAs, where if you don't know what's going on, if you're not a player of the game, the first time you watch that stream, you will have no idea what any of those icons means. I mean, it's really terrible. So you can imagine if you had the ability as you're watching, whether it's on a mobile device or on a PC or otherwise, the stream, and click on all of those elements of the UI, tap on them and get that data and be taught, this is what it means, this is what it's important, you will begin to be much more interested than you had been. We understand sports. We understand baseball and football because people have taught us the rules over the years. Games have much more complex rules than even those sports. We need to begin to teach people. Now, professional players, people who are really deep in the game, also want levels of information that they're not getting over broadcast these days. A lot of times people who watch the Dota championships like to watch it in-engine, in the spectator mode, because you can get all of the information and customize the UI elements. League doesn't allow that. When you watch the championships, you have to watch it over a stream because it's done on a closed system. And we've heard it directly from fans. We've seen it in the Reddit channels. People want that ability to get the information that's in the spectator mode, to get that data so that they can go deeper into what they're watching and experience and appreciate the nuances of professional level play. So information, this first tier, is incredibly important. Clicking on that, allowing for highlights, allowing for adjustments of UI. The next is the ability to customize. People like to make their own decisions. They like to decide what it is that they're watching and interact with. It's what differentiates a game from any other form of media. Every time I watch a movie, it's the exact same movie. Even if I play an RPG, even one of the ones that I used to make at Square Enix, it was still slightly different every time, right? I mean, the cutscenes were the same, unless I changed the characters, but the experiences and the levels and the enemies that I fought were different. Customization, personalization, that experience that you have playing a game is also what's going to drive people who are watching it to be much more engaged when they can customize what they're seeing, when they can make decisions themselves on what camera they want to watch it from, what information and UI they have on the screen, when they can make decisions about what team they want to support or what elements of the live stream they want to follow and cheer for. Everything from the ability to show MVPs to the kind of alternate views that we showed you. And of course, the advertisements. Now, the final area, and where I think the large revenue streams will come in the next 5 to 10 years, is in the influential ability. It's the ability as a viewer to decide where are you going to affect it. Change the weather, drop in a gun or a health potion, set traps. We are already seeing this with what studios are doing in the game industry today. We are hearing it directly from Twitch, whose COO a few weeks ago said he would love to see PUBG with a Hunger Games mode. This is not a maybe trend. This is the definite trend of the industry. And the technology and the tools that we have as game developers are going to be the deciding factor that changes and enables all of those experiences that I spoke about, from the ability to cheer to the ability to do that kill button and more. And so if we return to this graphic that was at the very beginning of this presentation, I know that I've spoken for too long and rambled on too many topics to be potentially remembered. This circular area was limited to just player and potentially the viewer who's interacting with chat. In other words, your ability to interact was only as the person playing the game and the person talking with the person streaming the game in the chat, telling them, hey, that was cool. I really enjoyed that speedrun. But when we think about the future of the game industry and the interactions that you've just seen, that ability to interact with it becomes the fans, the cheerers, becomes the people who like the personalities that they're watching with and who want to send them items and other elements. In other words, the entire broadcast itself becomes a new form of game interaction. And it's not limited to the number of people in your multiplayer session. 100,000 viewers, 1 million viewers can all interact simultaneously. How you design that, what levels of scale you build that to, I think the next great set of game designers are going to be trying to figure that out. Because once you hit the idea of 1 million people interacting, how you deal with that form of game design becomes a very interesting question. But the tools are there. And companies like ourselves are preparing those. You have the ability to do things with us and with Twitch, with YouTube and other places, with Mixer. They're going to enable and allow for this. And so I'm incredibly excited for how the industry is going to grow as a result. I will stop by sharing a little bit more about what we do. So we are a toolkit. We are an SDK. We are not a platform. We run on YouTube. We run on Twitch. We're partnered with their extensions program. And we enable you to take Unity, Epic, Unreal games, any kind of engine that you have as well, and create interactive streams through it. So you can extrapolate the data, synchronize it, deploy it, manage it. We've got a lot of exciting content that's being built from this on the ground up. We've got a Japanese game that's coming out
next month on mobile, which is going to have 20 simultaneous 24/7 live streams. So when you open up the app, it's going to say play or view, and when you hit view, you're going to be able to select a stream and cheer and side bet for the people who are playing the game. They're building from this on the ground up. We've got a series of other games in development these days. Everything from Counter-Strike Interactive. So as you're watching the Counter-Strike stream, you can change the UI, you can turn heat maps on and off, you can select the viewpoint that you want to watch it from over YouTube. So there's a lot of interesting things that are being built with this. We've got the ability to do real-time composition. So similar to a sports producer, if you have 20 different camera streams that you're generating with us, you can watch that all in the back end and make decisions and mix audio. You can do green screen stuff with it. We've got virtual reality developers working with it. So I'm happy to talk more about that, but I'll stop here. And if you've got any questions about all of the ideas I've shared, I'm happy to answer them. So thank you very much. Sure. Yep.
By providing help or hindrance, as the case may be. Oh, sorry. As I was saying, you were describing how viewers will be able to interact with the playing experience to provide help or hindrance to the players. Will there be some kind of verification system, any safeguards to prevent, let's say, abuses of these kinds of things?
That's a good question. It's actually one that we get answered a lot. There's a technical solution to this, and there's a game design solution to this. So when we do events back into the game, if you get it from our website, it's easier to see it here. When you do the streams back into it, so we call these events, they're always summarized rather than sent individually. So if you've got 10,000 people clicking on a kill button, we don't have 10,000 commands going back into the game server with a kill button on it. Now that's a design question after it becomes a technical solution. So do you want to allow people to press those kills? Do we want to allow for the trolls to just keep killing the same person over and over? Or is there a cooldown timer on this? Or do we have a moderator who's watching this live and saying, you know what, don't allow for that? So you have to solve it technically, which is what we've done through the summarization. But after that, it's a question of how you design for it as a service. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time. And if you have any questions, feel free to come up to me afterwards.